Hey, I'm Lurpus. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Team Vitality has been announced in terms of the CSGO lineup. It is NBK, Apex, RPK, Happy, and Zywoo. They were the team, obviously, more recently that was already assembled and was scrimming and playing against teams under the name Water Boys as kind of a placeholder. It was known that they were scouting out an org. This is one of the things that happened after NBK and Apex were unable to get bought out. First of all, in the case of someone like NBK, Cloud9 was someone that was available. I know Mouse Sports was interested in both NBK and actually might have already had Apex had he been available. Obviously, there was this figure touted of $800,000 each for a buyout. Now, that doesn't mean you necessarily had to pay $800,000, but that means if you want to buy them at that point in time, a few months ago, you needed to pay a high premium because that was buying them before the major to potentially compete in the major, and G2 themselves didn't know how their lineup was going to go, what lineup they would secure initially, and therefore wanted the option. So maybe if the lineup went really well initially, NBK says, you know what, actually, I would like to play in this team. I mean, you saw there was an interview NBK did where actually he said he thinks Existence is the best in-game leader in the French scene. Likewise, maybe Apex would have a change of heart. Maybe Shoxy would have a change of heart and they'd say, hey, we need an entry player. We need more skill. By the way, what I actually think G2 needs to some degree, although I don't know if Apex is the right player personality-wise to fit with that group. But again, G2 had these players under contract. We're paying them a salary. And so, you know what, it's entirely their prerogative if they don't want to let them go and want to potentially use them again in their squad while they're under contract. You've seen obviously that G2 players themselves, all except Kenny S, have signed new contracts. So now we've got these two French teams set in the scene, made of the big names that you will remember from VeXii Games and Titan and obviously Envious and LDLC. These squads over the years, a number of them formed together, and just like history, as something like the Sith, there must always be two in the French scene, right? One to hold power, to be a potential major winner, best team in the world, top 5 team in the world. There's nearly always another team that's top 10 in the world, can give upset potential, is still very good, and obviously then you get the incestuous back and forth of players between them, obviously culminating in French shuffles where you have massive like musical chair type scenarios of numerous players going back and forth and shifts of power, so that it was the VeXii Games core that had the power at first, and then it went over to the LDLC side, and then later on it came back via Shox having his revolution in G2, and G2 became the main team at the moment of the main team, but people are looking at this squad and saying maybe they'll become it. Now, the Vitality organization obviously makes a lot of sense for this set of players to be playing for because they are, to my knowledge, they're a French organization. They're a squad best known for their EULCS team, where for a long time they've had one of the best French players, the player Cabashard, best known for his ability as a top lane carry in a game in which actually there aren't that many top lane carries nowadays at the pro level. Most people just play tanks. So kind of an interesting, kind of a unique, colourful in-game player in that kind of a sense. Now, the lineup itself, what we'll do is we'll go player by player, and then we'll put all the pieces together, we'll look at the roles, and we'll consider their strengths. So we'll start with the player I consider the biggest name in this lineup, which is NBK. Legendary player, a player who has won 2 majors, a player who has played very key roles in almost every top French team in history, with the exception of the G2 lineup that won ECS and made it to the final of EPL when it was Shox and Scream. Every other great team that was the number 1 French team and was at the very peak of World Counter-Strike, NBK was there playing a different role often for each team, which is why I've often termed him or dubbed him the kingmaker of the French scene, a role which actually seems to, funnily enough, after that G2 revolution, have shifted over to Shox, who instead has had a lot of the say and has been the power player within the French team because of his individual talent and coming to a realization that he couldn't just be the one going elsewhere, getting kicked all the time. He had to kind of be the guy putting the team together. Now, admittedly, neither of them has made a 6 team since they got together in 2017, so maybe no one's the kingmaker right now. But anyway, NBK, the problem with this topic is NBK is not just a player in this team. I think he can play almost every role in the game. Okay, maybe not like superstar, carry, rifle. It's probably not going to do that at this point in his career, or primary AWP. He could be a secondary AWP, certainly. But other than that, he's got a fabulously versatile, wide skill set, has a very, very good mentality. I think of the French players, he has the best mentality in terms of work ethic, in terms of trying to work with teammates, in terms of carving out his role in relation to what other people's role are and therefore amplify and aid them to be better players and be supportive in that element as well, even though he has the raw skill set. Sure, you haven't seen it as much the last few years, to be a pretty good player himself and to frag at a high level and to be overqualified for that supportive position, as you've seen most famously from people like Zipnix, who came to the role from a similar role, actually, coming from being something of a star, adapting, trying to fit around other people, and hence shoring it up so there is no weak link in your team. You're even strong, and the old, a chain's only as strong as its weakest link means that you make the team fucking amazing. So the issue is, if it's that MBK we're getting to this team, cool, I'm on board. I want that player in every single French team. I want him in I want that MBK in G2 right now, quite frankly, instead of Smiths or Body, whoever it might be. The problem is, this NBK is not only now the in-game leader of this team, but that is the entire concept behind the role he's going to play in this team, because we don't want Happy to be the in-game leader. We've seen the mess that MVS has been the last couple of years. Apex, he gave it a try as a caller on maps like Mirage, and at other times in the past in Titan he's had times where he's briefly called or been a secondary caller. It works to some degree, and certainly it seems to help his game. I wouldn't say it works overall, though, and I wouldn't say he has a great mind for the game. So in this team, immediately in-game leader is an issue. And in terms of NBK, I do have my issues with this one. Listen, I'm a big supporter of this guy, and I think he can do a lot of things in this world. And I even think it's not impossible he could become a good in-game leader. I don't know about great one. There's very few great in-game leaders. Often they're called to it, drawn to it, and they have a very specific mentality. But you look at his personality, I'm not sure that fits an in-game leader, actually. He's someone who's certainly a confident player, and he's certainly a player who can handle people talking back to him and who can give some instruction, but he's not like a natural leader figure in that sense. He's actually more of the sort of like, this might sound weird if you ask some of his teammates, but to me, he's more sort of like the quiet guy who takes things in, thinks about them, does what he can, accepts what he can't fix. Yes, tries to talk to people. Yes, tries to contribute ideas, but he's not kind of like the general or the drill sergeant or the guy who stands up and says, hey, you all do these things and everything's going to go the way I'd say it's going to go. He isn't that guy. And so I have to say, personality-wise, I'm not sure he's suited to be an in-game leader. Now, admittedly, a lot of what I just described, obviously they're very different people, but some of those themes would fit with someone like an MSL, by the way, like a Sean Gares, which is one of the reasons why those guys have been very good in-game leaders in certain senses of being a leader and not as good in other areas, and hence they've gone as far as their talents can take them and no further because their weaknesses have prevented them going further to the absolute top of the scene. It's very rare you get these glaive, fallen type figures who can seemingly do it all when they want to. I also think you look at his history, he has tried to be the in-game leader of teams on 3 different occasions now. He tried it at the beginning of LDLC after the first Fred Shuffle, literally gave it up something like a week into doing it. Then he tried it in Envious in 2016 when Happy was out of control. It didn't seem to do much to the team. They actually still continued to force boy like morons. They couldn't get Kenny S online fully, although they did integrate him a bit more, and the team generally was lackluster despite having some very good players in it. So that didn't give me a lot of confidence. Obviously, he got his chance earlier this year when they brought in Mixwell and Shox was out of the lineup getting his wrist surgery. I don't know to this day why people still talk as though that G2 had any success or had any sort of like trajectory that meant they were going to be successful. Who did they beat that was good? What best of 3 did they win that was legit? What results did they have that suggest to you they had any sort of an upward momentum trajectory or progress that could have happened? I couldn't see anything. It looked like a waste of time to me. And that's why I definitely agree with Ocelot/Carlos to give Shox a go instead and make this lineup on paper. Kenny S and Shox together, what an existence as well. That's a very tantalizing project, a much more tantalizing project than what they've got now. Now, between the two and what we've seen, I'd still go with G2's lineup now as better currently and with more potential than the NBK lineup. But okay, I will certainly say this one hasn't lived up to potential and probably needs a player change in the future and maybe some shaping of its direction from coaching or existence getting some sports psychologists or Kenny S finding some way to get engaged with the gaming. I don't know what it would be. There's many different ways you could do it. But the point is, I think people really overblew how successful the NBK leadership project was earlier this year. So all of them have been somewhat short-lived. They haven't really worked. They haven't even necessarily made him play better or any of the star players play better or the team improve their form at all or much. So I'm very skeptical that this is going to work. I hate people becoming in-game leaders because of happenstance. Like you look around, there's no one that I want to play with as an in-game leader, or I can't play with someone as an in-game leader. I'll just do it. There's no I'll just do it. Being an in-game leader is like moving to fucking China from Europe. If you move to China from Europe and you want to learn Chinese, moving there and going, I'll give it a go and I'll stay for a few months. You'll never learn Chinese doing that, mate. You need to move there and go, right, I'm fully on board here. I'm going to live here as long as it takes. I'm going to fully embrace this language and culture. I'm trying to speak as little English or whatever European language you speak as possible. I'm just going to force myself to basically act as though I was like a 5-year-old kid trying to learn Chinese from my parents. Like, I just start from scratch. And you have to be committed to it, even if you're bad initially, because that's the only way you're going to get good at anything that you don't have a basic natural talent for. And quite frankly, when it comes to being an in-game leader and a tactician, nobody has a natural talent in the sense that you could just take that and go to the pro level. Everyone needs to level up to some degree. So I know MBK has the motivation and has the drive as a person that he could potentially connect that to being an in-game leader and do it. I just haven't seen any of it so far. And the fact that he's quit and that his teammates have convinced him to quit also is a worrying sign to me, because certainly we've had these players who switched. Many of the great in-game leaders didn't start as in-game leaders. You're thinking of Fallen, thinking of MSL, Carrigan. There are so many names out there, Sean Gers, who didn't start as an in-game leader, but they learned some of the craft. But the key thing is, all those guys committed to it. You haven't seen those guys switch back to not being an in-game leader or trying to be a star player or trying to be this, that, the other. They still remain as in-game leaders. That's just who they are now. So if MBK is on for that, cool, I'm on board. Let's give it a go. But if you're going to quit after 2 months, if you're going to quit after 6 months, you're going to quit when this lineup fails and one of the players leaves or someone goes to G2, or you're going to quit and go and join G2 as a player, just remember, think back on this video. What were you wasting everyone's time for? Okay, cool. It's all cool. It's cool to try stuff, but don't kind of like sell me the big ticket that you're going to go all out and you're going to do something great if you're not. So there's my biggest concern immediately. Now, I will say, I definitely think he has talent and a mind that he could add as a secondary caller, as a sidekick to an in-game leader. I know that because he has done it and he has been very successful. That is very games in the early days. That is the Titan of 2014 that was still pretty solid except for the majors. That is LDLC that won a major. That is Envious with Kenny S that won a major. That is G2 in the modern day that still had some big results, still won 2 massive tournaments and had a few top 4s. This is a guy who's done that part very solidly, but that is a very different role from main in-game leader. So I also will add in, from whenever I've talked to MBK, I think he's a cerebral player, and I use that term very carefully. So I don't think Shox is a cerebral player. I think he's intuitively a genius at the game. I don't think he could verbalize or be very eloquent about why he does something or what he wants to do. It just comes to him. He reads the game. It's almost like the game speaks to him. NBK is much more a player who could break down what he's doing, explain how he's trying to do it, but that's how he does it, and that's how he himself has improved. Now, he's got his game to a certain level. I don't know that he can translate that to teammates, figure out people's roles. Plus, like I said, in terms of personality, he's not a very overbearing figure, which to some degree, to me, the in-game leader is the director. He's an auteur. He has control over what's going to happen, and some of the in-game leaders, if you're a Carrigan, you work with a lot of stars, you give them some input, but at the same time, you still decide. You start, no, I want you like this, and I want you to do it this way, and even if you do something, like, try and think of what I told you earlier. Like, that's the kind of guy I want to. I don't know that he's this kind of guy. I think, if anything, one of MBK's problems when I've seen him be an in-game leader is it sounded like he talked to other people and thought naively, oh, if they tell me what they want to do and what they think they're best at, and I give them that, then they'll play to their best and we'll all be a good team and a happy family. That's a very naive way of trying to be a general manager, a leader, an in-game leader, a captain, a coach, whatever you want to call it. I don't think that that's actually a very successful strategy. Sometimes you have to, believe it or not, think, I know better than this guy what he needs to do and what he needs to do for our team. And that might mean convincing him to sacrifice or do something that he actually doesn't want to do and give him confidence he can do it, make him buy into it, and then get him to do it. Now, as a player, as I said, I'm totally on board. I think he's wicked. I don't know what his role is going to be in this team, but if he's going to be the in-game leader, I'm going to go ahead and guess he's going to be either in the entry pack helping with Apex, or he's going to be semi-lurk / supportive player. Again, roles he can definitely do. Now, Apex is obviously another big name here. Certainly a very skilled entry player, one of the best we've ever had in CSGO. I've always respected his mentality that he sticks to this role, to tie into the NBK theme, who hasn't stuck to being in-game leader. I love that he's been effective, that he's been able to battle through personal slumps. Not the most cerebral player, but actually in some senses suited to be an entry fragger. And that way it takes away a lot of the decision making, a lot of the reading of the game that you could make mistakes from. Sure, I do think people have gone too far, just as they did with the role of lurker. And people like Hiko and GetRight destroyed that role by abusing it way too far and then in slumps trying to do it in quite a selfish way. I think Apex also has gone too far with the entry thing. Like, he should definitely be an entry fragger, but it's not like that means he's the first person going in every time. It's not like he has to run through a brick wall with no utility when he's using Envious. He should be part of an entry group in the same way as you can be a wide receiver without always being the guy who's the target to get the ball every single fucking time. So I do think they went too far with that, and that cost him, and it cost him in terms of motivation at times. I do think he's overhyped at the moment. I didn't think he was godlike in the last G2 lineup over the last few months. I don't know why people with this lineup, in contrast to G2 where they look at the reality of all the players and go, that's not that good. Yeah, you're right. But they look at this lineup and for some reason everyone imagines each player separately at his career peak and goes, wow, imagine all those players together. No, we're not imagining those players together. I'm sorry. Like, it would be cool if they can get there. And if you want to do a hypothetical, yeah, it'd be fucking sick lineup on paper, although it wouldn't have a proper in-game leader. But it isn't those players right now, and that isn't the Apex right now. So I do think he's a good player. Certainly, I think he's one of the best players in this team, arguably the best. Great pickup. You certainly want him in this squad. As I said, I'd have him in G2 except for the attitude issues. A little bit overhyped. Now, the problem is, people don't know Apex as a person very well. They know some elements of his personality, and they see him in interviews and the memes and Twitter, etc., but they don't know what he's like as a teammate. So I will say this. I'll just be absolutely frank, and I don't know if he'd cop to this or admit it or disagree or what, but that's the style of my videos. I'm going to say it anyway. He is a massive whiner, and that's in the context of being French, because there are a lot of French players and people I've known in my life who generally whine a lot. Now, English people complain, but there's a difference between complaining and whining. Whining to me is like incessant complaining or complaining about things just for the sake of it, just out of frustration, to vent, or because you hate what that person's doing. You have to tell them, you have to think about. There's a bit of that when it comes to Apex, quite frankly, and I've had past teammates of his tell me they did not appreciate that. And unless he was playing amazingly and the team was winning, it does grind on people when you behave that way. That's why, as much as I like the Simples, Dardoks, Forgivens of the world, if I hear from teammates that they do that behaviour, I'll never sort of say that's fine. And I'll never tell that his teammate, yeah, I'll put up with that because he's really sick at shooting people in the head or clicking mouse one. No, that's an issue they have to deal with themselves. And when they do deal with it, that's what's going to let them be amazing and their team be able to play around them and play with them and play for them. So I'll also add, seemingly he's someone who wants input. He has his own opinions about things. That's one other thing about whiners. They often think they could do it better. So I do think he can play a secondary caller role, but is he going to win this team? You've already got MBK who's better at that. What? And then Happy's just going to say nothing? You can't have the too many cooks scenario of having three people trying in-game lead. You've got to have a clear vision. It's like the old saying. That's why I say you should be a director or an auteur, because the best way in Counter-Strike is for 5 people to agree or to just be told to do one thing, whether it's the best or not, then 3 people come up with slightly different ideas, slightly different ways of executing it, try and make it work. That's very unlikely it's going to work. I think that's one of the reasons, actually, that FaZe clan, Carrigan, if anything, might have given too much freedom to some of those players. And then they, with their own freedom, did players that didn't work together, even though individually they were sometimes brilliant. And then they looked at Carrigan and blamed him because they failed, because they didn't know how to work with their teammates. So you see, it's a very slippery slope to give people what they want. That's the way they get destroyed, because when you give them what they want and you say, here's the power, you change your life, and then they go away and they fuck their life up, they come back and go, why did you give me the power to do that? Why didn't you just tell me what to do? People fucking hate that, believe me. Now then, RPK. I think that RPK has been very overrated because of the last Envious lineup. First of all, the narrative that like he was super sick in that lineup, definitely not. He was pretty good for like a couple of months. He had a couple of key events where he was the best player in the team. And obviously, if you're the best player in the team that has Scream and Happy in it, yeah, that's a nice little accolade, even if they aren't at career peaks. But he wasn't like sick the whole time he was in Envious. He wasn't sick the whole time he was in G2. G2 was heavily carried by Scream and Shocks. People make out like, no, it was Scream, Shocks and RPK. No, there was no big trio. It was a big duo. And then what's great is because you had this big duo, that's when RPK could shine to a degree, because he was a very stable player, because he played the same way each time, so you could play around him, because he didn't seem to need massive amount of resources in terms of what he did. That's also a big bonus, a boon, so you can give the resources to the star players. I think that's what he can do in this team, and that's what he did at his best in Envious. It's just that because the rest of them were so bad, he stayed at this very stable level. They went below, and so he looked like he was way above them. He was, it's just that they went below him. So I think that if he plays that role for this team, he's a great fit. He's a very good rock-style player, guy who's just very stable. He's got a pretty solid mentality. Doesn't seem like he gets too emo, gets too argumentative, whines too much. Just seems like a guy who just fucking plays. I can respect that. Workman-like, something of a Navi in that respect. I think he does have, seemingly some health issues from last year. Hopefully that's cleared up. Then you've got to add in, he's someone where he's even quit the game in the past, lost motivation, didn't want to play it. Now, sure, CSGO is in a very different place, but I wonder if that's going to affect how long he wants to play for, or what type of team. Does he have to get to a certain level? Otherwise, he's going to lose motivation. I don't know. Problem is, I don't know much about his personality. I'm not French. I haven't talked to him, so I can't give you much more insight there. The other 2 players, So we've got Happy. Now, Happy was a strong player in the past, and in his own way was a strong in-game leader. He was nowhere near the best in-game leader. I don't know where that kind of like myth comes from. Oh, I know. It's because he won majors and he won many championships and he had a great team. People just assume that means he was a great in-game leader. No, not the case, because you know what? The same applies to Exist. Do you think Exist is a top 5 in-game leader of all time? Is he a godlike in-game leader? I don't think most people would say so now, yet everything you just said applies to him. Now, the key obviously we're happy was, even as an in-game leader, he was a very strong player. And actually, even in Envious, he was a pretty decent player. His fragger was still pretty good. He was very disconnected from the team, which is outrageous for an in-game leader to be, but he still could do a decent enough job. He wasn't a bomb by any means. Now, his attitude has, quite frankly, always been the major issue. Now, I will probably do some content on this, but at one point in time, in a weird way, his sort of rebellious nature, his stubbornness, actually was a boon. It really helped him and helped his teams and helped define three very different lineups of LDLC/Envious that was successful. One in 2014, one in the latter part of 2014, and one in 2015. But it's also what made Envious lineups later somewhat shit. And then his version of getting rid of that attitude wasn't to change who he is and alter it and still have all its strengths, was almost to go like, right, NBK, you can be the in-game leader. I'll just, fuck it, sabotage it. Then later on, be like, okay, I'm the in-game leader, but bring in a coach. I'll do what he says. Oh, we'll change our style of play. Like, at the end of the day, shit or get off the pot. Be the in-game leader. Be who you're going to be. Improve. Work on your faults, yeah. Try to improve. But don't just go, I'll compromise then. Like, it's one or the other. You can't be half of something and half of nothing. Like, it just doesn't work to do it that way. So my big problem here is I know he's got the skills to do it. And if he brings those skills, this is going to be a team with a lot of firepower. But my biggest issue is, can he reinvent himself as not a player, but as a strong individual player, potentially a lurker, semi-lurk, but integrate that with the team and also be a star while also being someone who sacrifices for the team? There's my question mark, because if he's still the guy who thinks he's going to break the meta, then it's ruined already, and he could be the number one problem in this team. Like, forget Kiyashima and Sharks and Kenny S and Existence and all these players that have had issues or people have had concerns about them. The most detrimental player in the history of French Counter-Strike is Happy, and that's no exaggeration. He's also done a lot for the French scene, and without him they wouldn't have 2 majors, but he's also had times when he's capsized the whole ship, and sure, Captain went down with the ship, but that doesn't really say much when you're the one who sank it. So you look now at the final player, Zywoo. This is the new player, someone who's never played at the top pro level, at big lands, never been part of a superstar team, never played with teammates of this caliber. So you know what? From what I've seen of an FPL and some of the games in Against All Authority, there is a lot of potential here. Now, people are going way too far saying he's like the next Simple or Nico. Like, those are I won't say once in a generation because they're both in the same generation, but those are like, from the regions they're from, they might end up being far and away the best players to ever play Counter-Strike from those regions. I doubt anyone will ever challenge them. That's how uniquely talented they are. Now, is Zywoo that? Well, first of all, he comes from a region that had Shocks and Kenny S. So we already know they've had gods and monster players. So he's already not that unique. Secondly, we don't even know he's going to get to that level. So he's almost certainly been overhyped already. Hasn't done anything yet. Hasn't even played at a top level yet. There's no reason. Sure, you can be excited about it and say, I can't wait to see him play. I hope he does these things. I get that. Don't make out like he's already there, though. Anyone saying like he's already going to be one of the best players in the world, that's a ridiculous statement to make at this point in time. Now, he's got very big shoes to fill because he is going to try and be one of the star players, one of the hype players in this team. And all the past French teams that have been to the top have had either Kenny S or Shocks. That's famously what they did. In fact, often they just swapped them around, hence the French shuffles. That's going to be very, very tough to be as good as those guys were. And in a team that doesn't actually have, at the moment, a top in-game leader. So there's a lot of difficulties that aren't necessarily his fault. They're just circumstances he's coming into, but that will make it tough to live up to these expectations people are giving for him. With that said, I do think he looks like he's going to be a good player. He's someone who has star potential, and I think it would be really cool for the French scene, and this team obviously, to have another potential star. I would love to live in a world where Zywoo, Kenny S, Shocks, whatever teams they're in, are all at peak form and playing amazingly, and it's not unrealistic this could happen. Now, one of the problems I have with this team is got to be roles immediately. As I've alluded to, in-game leader. So you've got 3 potential in-game leaders in NBK, Happy, and Apex. But none, quite frankly, are suitable at this moment. Like, they would all need work. They would all need a lot of time. They would all need the right squad around them with the right mentality. There's a lot to be done. Now, you might say, combine their forces. Maybe the 3 of them working together as a committee could do it. As I've alluded to before, not someone who buys into the committee idea. I think it produces inferior products where you just compromise with each other and you get something worse. You can have creative tension. That tends to be between duos, quite frankly, hence songwriting duos, etc. teammate duos, and even then there tends to be one who wins out slightly in that battle and the other is the one who's conceding to him, and that's why you still get great ideas. It's not always a pure compromise. I think that's a very naive idea if people think it's actually that way with Lennon and McCartney and fucking Carmack and Romero, and quite frankly the Lennon-McCartney one's always overplayed because apparently most of their songs they just wrote separately, they didn't even write together, so they were the songwriters but there wasn't a lot of collaboration on that one, so that's actually often been a very overblown angle in that respect. So I do think that the fact that you have so many competing interests and visions of the game could actually have the opposite effect. It could mean they combust entirely, players get kicked, players have to leave, morale gets sapped because people have their own vision of the game. That's a problem for me. Then you've got to look at the fact that who's the main AWPer of this team? There is only one player in this team suitable to be a primary AWPer, and that appears to be Zywoo. The problem is if he is going to be a primary AWPer, then he is going to have a lot of pressure on him, especially since the very successful French teams have only ever been able to work with Kenny S or Cayley as a primary AWPer, and Cayley's out of the scene and Kenny S isn't in his best form right now. Now, the reason why that's a problem is, first of all, Cayley cheated, so if you have a cheater, you don't know how to play around a great player. Like I was cheating, you don't know what a real player's like. Or you've played with Kenny S, and he is one of the best AWPers in any version of any esports game ever, to a level that's unbelievable. Like the things this guy can do, and the way his understanding of using the weapon and his special confidence, it's quite unique in its own way. All of the great AWPers have it, by the way. They have their own way of thinking how they're going to get their shot, how they're going to make it work. And the reason they're so unique is we all know generally what they're going to do, what positions they take, and yet they're still able to get it done in spite of that. So they have to be very unique people in a way that's different from in-game leaders or star players or support. It is its own role. So is Zywoo going to come in with no experience, playing with legends who have the expectation he's going to carry them with the op? That's a big, big amount of pressure to put on a guy's shoulders. I'd like it to work out. Will it? I don't know if it will. Now, will he just be a hybrid? Because if he's going to be just a hybrid, then the team lacks a primary AWPer. Now, I think you can play a rifle game, but at the moment, having the option to go in the AWP is obviously a key one overall. Now, in terms of who the star players of the team are going to be, which is different from your role, this is more like the balance of how we explain a team and how you divide up responsibility to some degree. Okay, so you're going to start with Zywoo, right? I've told you, he's already unproven. We don't know yet that he is a star player. Sure, let's imagine he's going to develop, though. Who's our next one? That's the problem, right? There's no one who really suits the job. If I look at, like, RPK, again, I told you, more in the middle of the team. Being a star player, I think you're asking too much. It's not Source. Apex. Again, I've seen that in Titan. Wasn't that great a look. I've seen that in G2. If he has to be your main firepower, because he plays the entry role, it's a very up and down role because you can't guarantee results in the same way. You're not alive as much in the round. Again, hard to be the star player doing that. What about Happy? Happy's someone who has the skill set to do it. I don't know what role he's going to be playing. I don't know how he's going to reinvent himself. And I've also never seen him be a star player without being the in-game leader, which he is not right now. So at the moment, I've got three people who I'd probably in an ideal team want as my like third star, or the one who is in the middle in terms of resources, attention, how he gets to play, and is supporting other stars, and therefore their numbers pushes over the top. Now, again, can we have all three and do it by committee? That can sort of work. But I don't think it works ultimately in the long run. In the same way as Mousespot's got very good, and they got to a high level in the world with Sonny and Rops and Oscar. Now, these could all be the best player on like the 9th best team in the world. If you put all three together, they could be a trio that could give you the firepower to be, let's say, the 3rd best team in the world. I'm ignoring what the rankings were earlier in the year and the situation because they got that title. They were at the top for like placeholder reasons because other people fell apart. We're talking about like true level of what a 3rd best team would be. You could do that. The problem is you don't really have the one true star who can carry all the time. Maybe Sonny will develop into that. I don't think so. Oscar doesn't seem to have the mentality to, even though I think he's a fabulous player and has the skill set to. Rops is too young right now. So by committee, you can accomplish quite a lot. You just can't get to the absolute top. So there's a question I have there. That's why I contrast them with Mouse Sports. Now, supportive elements also somewhat lacking in this team. Okay, we've got MBK, but that's already taken for granted because he's the in-game leader. So he's probably not going to be a high-fragging in-game leader. Most in-game leaders are supportive elements anyway, and the fact that they are means that's why we think of one other player as a support player, because really we have two anyway. It's just you take for granted the in-game leader will do it and they'll connect and have a similar vision for the game. That's an aspect people ignore quite often, actually. That's why MSL works with AZ. That's why NBK has worked with all his in-game leaders. That's why Zipnix works with Glaive or Carrigan before. these people have to be on the same page to set the tone for the team. Think of the rhythm section in a band, as it were. They're never going to be the star singer or the fucking guitar with all the sick hooks. That they're putting down the basis and the foundation of the song and the music, and the others are adding on top. And it's only from that platform, that stage that is set by the rhythm section, that the others can then shine and go ham. That doesn't mean you have to be stars. And if you're the best and the others aren't that good, the music's probably not going to be quite that good, even though it can be pretty good. So it's a complicated scenario all in all. So I've said NBK is going to be. What else? Happy? I mean, he can play a lurk kind of a role, so I could see a world in which he could make that happen. Doesn't have the mentality for it, though, frankly, and definitely doesn't have a very good mentality for sacrificing. Is RPK, while he's a very solid player, I don't get the sense he wants to play shitty roles, or that he is someone with the mentality to be able to put up with a lot of hard times and a lot of crap jobs in the game. So quite frankly, I think we're lacking a lot of supportive elements in this team, and that's something I could see being an issue going forwards, because even with firepower, supportive elements, for me, are the glue of a team that make chemistry come together. I think you look at the great teams in history, practically all of them have the great support players in the history of this game. Now, to me, as a result, the balance seems a bit off. I see a lot of potential skill, not at the moment, but a lot of potential skill if these players get into form, but how's the chemistry going to work? I mean, I will give you an example here as a contrast of a team that I saw that looked similar when it was formed, but actually ended up working out really well. So I'm going to give you an example of where I ended up being wrong. When they made the Fnatic lineup in 2012, when Khan retired as in-game leader. So this team had no true in-game leader. It was a lineup that had Exist. Now you have to understand, in 1.6, Exist was like a really good, in theory, star player, but I'd have put him like second star or third star type of player. But he had a pretty skilled play. He was a skilled rifler, very streaky, somewhat like the FNX, if you remember, in the old 2006 lineup, something akin to that, but not quite as high fragging power. So they had Exist, they had Karrigan, also not an in-game leader. He was like a secondary AWPer, and he was a hybrid player, and again, second star type of guy. That's probably where you want him. Then they had Trace, okay, one of the best players in the world, the best players of all time, probably the most skilled Danish player ever, but wasn't in superstar form at this point in time, and he's not working with only Danes or any Danish system, so he was a little bit diminished in terms of level of play. Then you had Freeze. Okay, Freeze was a good primary AWPer, wasn't on the level of a Delpan or a Marklov or whatever, but he was pretty good. Is he going to be the main carry of your team? Probably not. You probably want him as your second carry. Then you had Modi. Now, he had the skill set to be the main star, had attitude issues, and sometimes didn't always have the mentality to work with the team as much to be the main star. So the problem is, when you had this team, my analogy was, it's like you've made a football team, and every player is an attacking midfielder. There's no true striker in terms of overall package and mentality. You don't have any defensive line. You don't have like someone who's going to control the tempo. You've got all these great playmakers, but they're not going to play make for each other. They're all just going to kind of do their own thing. Now, it actually ended up in the rare case that it worked. This team actually, I mean, they were very briefly because they made some lineups. They got Gooks into the lineup later, and they brought in Furter over from Lions. Sure, it didn't work long term, but it did work for some tournaments. They won some tournaments. They were the number one team very briefly. And sure, I've got to give credit. That one did work out, but I think that's the exception rather than the rule. So this team could work. It could be powerful. But quite frankly, I don't think the basis is there to be an elite side, an S-class team, S-class tier team. I don't think they're going to win big international tournaments, quite frankly. Like if they do, and then everyone goes and links to this moment in the video, ha, you were wrong. It'll be because they got some like bullshit draw, or maybe it's like mouse spots. They play a bunch of bad teams, and then when they play the good team, they beat them in an upset. Okay, that could happen. I mean, when I say win tournaments, I mean like you play a real tournament with all the top teams, you play a bunch of top teams, you get to the final, you beat a quality side, playing better than them. That's what we mean by winning tournaments. I don't think they're going to do that, quite frankly. I think they could be a very strong dark horse type team, like the current mouse. Let's say the level is what the current mouse sports team is. Solid, like, you know, 6th or 7th best team in the world. Not going to do much more than that. And that's if everything works out. We haven't yet seen this team. One of the problems I could see with this team is mentality. There are lots of potential issues all over the place in terms of many of the players. There's no clear leader. Happy can be a divisive figure. RPK is an older player who doesn't know what his motivation and drive is anymore. Apex can complain a bit too much. Zywoo is brand new. He's never played at the top scene. He's coming in with a bunch of moving parts around and lots of parts that aren't established, quite frankly. And I hope he gets brought up the right way and doesn't become really arrogant as a result of it, or alienated from who these other guys are that are very different from him. Now, let's just address briefly famous French players who in theory could be in this team, but aren't. The left out players, as it were. So let's start with Scream. Clearly a very skilled player, but I have to say not much else. Like, first of all, one thing people always ignore, they love to bang on existence for like lack of major runs deep in tournaments. They love to say like, haha, Shox hasn't made it to the playoffs of a major. Obviously it ended with the Boston major. Since Nate was playing in, what was it, early 2016, would it be late 2015? let me think. No, it'd be early 2050. It'd be kind of each say 2050. They love to say that, right? They don't ever mention when they're hyping up Scream that he should join every French lineup, but this guy has done close to fuck all at majors. He had the first run when he was with Existence. Then he had a King win, ESL Cologne, when he made top 8. What else has he had? Now, he hasn't always been the best teams. I don't blame him entirely, but that's it. He doesn't have a lot of success at the majors, quite frankly, and has lifted way less trophies than all the other big names in the French scene. So I'm amazed fans. I understand because he's so flashy and such a popular character, and I like to follow his career, but I think people do overrate him to some degree. There's also the stylistic barrier that he's got one style of play and it can be very good, but that's really the only gear he's shown us. When he's tried to switch it up, he's just become a mediocre player, or you're just wasting your time having Scream now. Why not get a different player who does that job? Then you've got to add in his confidence issues. Some of the times when he hasn't been a star player, he's been willing to be moved around, or say he'll do a different job, or say, I want to play supportive. That's bad in itself. I want star players to be star players, to know they're a star player, to own it, to demand what they need in the game, and then to fucking deliver it. So I have my issues, and I know some of the people in the French scene also don't buy that Scream's going to be able to do these things. Kiyashima, listen, Kiyoshima's a very good all-rounder. He could be an entry, he could be like a second star, he could be third star, he could be a supportive player. I don't really buy that he could be an in-game leader either, but okay, he's got a lot of skills going for him, and there's a lot of reasons you could want him in this team. His problem is attitude concerns. Now that's, first of all, being complaining in itself, but mainly it's about dedication. He has been kicked from 2 potential major winning teams, championship level teams, for openly admitting or not admitting that he doesn't have the motivation to practice as much, or wants time off, or doesn't have the same drive, or doesn't like playing with this guy or that guy. That can be a problem, and that's one of the reasons why you haven't seen him being drafted into the top French teams the last few years, quite frankly. Now, any of the other names you can bring up are a joke, so let's go through them quickly. Sixer, well, he's just a trash player. He's not very good. He's a good 1.6 player. I haven't seen anything in CSGO to suggest he's a good player. He only ops, and he's not good at that, so I don't know why I would have him in this team. Hadji, it's not good enough, quite frankly, from what I've seen so far. Seemed okay. I don't really think he should be in even the second French team. Probably a third French team would be the place for him. Currently plays for Imperial. Probably the right level of team. Does he play for Imperial? Yes, I think he does. Whatever, I don't give a fuck. Then you got XMS. Well, he's just retired, hasn't he? And he ruined his own gameplay and unhappy and envious. So, okay, I've got a bit of sympathy for you, but you also quit. So who gives a fuck? Enjoy the rest of your life. See you, mate. Now, what's the future for this team? I think they could be a top 10 team. I think they could be an exciting, maybe even dangerous upset team. I think they're going to have clear issues with leadership and the sportive elements, even keeping the team together, having good attitude, what they're going to do in the long term, if they're going to keep those roles. I could see there also being a disappointing, conflicted squad that appears instead of that team that's a top 10 team. I can also see a world where one of these players gets a call up and goes to G2. And as a result, this lineup's not as good. G2 becomes better and becomes one of the best teams in the world. I think what happens is in the next few months, the potential is there. G2 gets a bit more stable. They get a bit more firepower due to players improving. They grind as a team, and they're in a position where they're looking a lot more attractive for one of these players from an up and down inconsistent team to go and join that squad. I think people are overlooking the fact that the G2 players can improve and the squad can get better because they're not looking at the circumstances. They've added Malik as a coach. They haven't had a coach properly in the same way in existence teams. That adds a different look. They've got Existence and Smith still coming back. They haven't played for that long still competitively from when they were at the top in the past. Shocks has come off wrist injury and has improved month on month on month. He's getting very good. He isn't quite at superstar level yet, but he's a pretty good player already. Kenny S has some motivation issues, but is sure he can get back to the top time and time again. Body, quite frankly, I think was just there for the major spot because he needed 3 players. As a result, he's no longer needed. Now, he's been an okay player. I haven't seen real signs that he can develop much more. But then again, he's young. Let's see what Existence does with him. Let's see what Malik does with him. Let's see how he responds to the criticism of being in this position where, sure, people are saying he should be cut because they can't say Smiths because Shocks forever he's more cut Smiths. Okay, now, here's the thing. I don't think it's going to go the other way. I don't think someone's going from G2 to this team, the Waterboys Vitality. Now, sure, it's possible Kenny S could, because he's left that gap in his contract, so you can see how the G2 project goes. He's played with many of the players in the Vitality squad. If he joins, they get a primary op. Sure, that all sounds wicked, but I think the G2 team has the potential to still improve, and therefore he'd want to stay there. And I don't necessarily know he wants to take his chances here, although who knows what the mind of Kenny S is on that particular one. Even when you talk to him, it's not always as clear as you might imagine. And there's still time for either. He can see which way he wants to go on that. And I think he's done a clever move waiting as he has because he's got a lot of leverage overall. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.